Hey everybody, Eric Joseph Lewis here, and today I'm going to teach you how to make coconut milk. And of course, step one is going to be get some coconuts. So it's pretty easy. Here in South Florida, what I like to do is just drive around with my pole pruner in the car, and when I see a house that has coconuts, I pop in, knock on the door, and say, "Oh, what beautiful coconuts you have. How is it that you protect them from whiteflies and lethal yellowing disease? And do you have some kind of a landscaping company that attends to these things for you?" And if they say, "I have no idea what you're talking about, I don't do anything to my coconuts," then I say, "Oh, great, can I harvest them all?" And a lot of times people are very generous and they are happy to share their coconuts with you. So once you've got the coconuts, then step two is to get into the coconuts, and that involves a machete. So when we're getting into this coconut processing, there's 3 different types of coconuts that we're going to be looking for. The ripest one are the brown ones that have this very woody husk, and these are the hardest ones to get the husk off of. The next stage is kind of half ripe, that has thick meat that's kind of rubbery meat, and there's a lot of water in these. Then the next stage is the ones like this, where there's hardly any meat, they're totally full of water, and you can barely hear the water shake in there when you shake the coconut. And that's because the water is what turns into the meat. That sugar turns into fat. And so these are the sweetest coconuts with the most water, and these are the most fibrous and fatty coconuts with the least water. So these are the ones that are going to make kind of the substance of our coconut milk, and these are the ones that are going to give it that water and sweetness that we're looking for. We'll also be using the jelly and the rubber meat and combining it all together, and I'll explain how that works when we get to the blender stage. But the first thing we want to do with these woody, brown, fully mature coconuts, and these are great because you can find them laying all over the ground. The thing that's tough about them is it's very difficult to get this woody husk off unless you have a magical husk remover. And this is a tool that was introduced to me by some friends this year, and it's the most exciting coconut processing technology that I've seen so far. First off, I love that it's super simple. It's just made out of 2 pieces of rebar that have been kind of worked and welded, and 2 little sharp plates of metal that have been welded onto the end of it. That's really cool to me. I love simple tools. It was only 50 bucks online. It was really 35 bucks, but the shipping from Hawaii was 15 bucks. Although it was actually made in Thailand, so I might be able to go straight to the manufacturer. I'll put a link to the source where I got this. It's from Aranyik, I don't know how to pronounce it, but I'll post the link in the description section of the video. And yeah, all in all, it came out to being 50 bucks, and this has saved me countless hours already in just a few days of coconut processing. So I'll show you how this works. We basically pop into it, pry it open, and a big chunk of the husk comes off. Same thing over here. And we just keep working our way around until the whole husk is removed. And there we have our fully husked and removed coconut. Then the next one is the more green one. I like to just work from the bottom side. My friend Kathy Shepherdson over in Fort Myers with the Conscious Space reusable shop. It's like all herbs and reusable items. She likes to go from the side, but I guess I just learned to go from the bottom, and so that's the way that I like to work it. So you can see there's that rubber meat that I was talking about, and we'll just cut right into that, and there's gonna be a bunch of water in this one. Now here's one that's a jelly meat that I already cut into and got the water out of. So I'll just chop this in half so you can see just what I mean by jelly meat. And this is meat that's so tender, even just the back of my thumb is enough to scrape it off. And it's so delicious. These are the kind of coconuts that really made me fall in love with coconuts. I was one of those people who didn't like coconuts. I don't like the fibrous, fully ripe meat. It just like, the way it feels in my mouth and I don't know. But when I had this jelly coconut and the nice sweet water from it, my sentiments changed very rapidly. And then later I learned that the brown coconuts are the ones that make the nice fatty milk. So I now have a great love for the brown coconuts too. But these are the ones that turned my heart to fall in love with the mighty Coco nucifera. And gosh, what an amazing plant it is. Every part of the plant can be used. The wood makes amazing tools that you can even find in like Targets and Walmarts these days because they're being commercially utilized. And the leaves can be made into baskets, and my good friend Doug Elliott has a coconut palm hat that's really adorable. I love it. And yeah, you can make baskets and hats and skirts, of course, and they can be used for thatching on roofs. So the list of useful parts of the coconut and ways to use the coconut just goes on and on. Of course, there's the coconut coir that makes an excellent soil additive, and maybe one day I'll figure out how to compost these shells in such a way that we can make our own kind of coir soil amendment. So each one of these coconuts has there's a different technique to getting the meat out of it and utilizing the edible parts of the coconut. So we'll go ahead and start with the fully ripened woody one, and I've got my trusty little stainless steel Mora knife here. Carbon fiber ones work fine too, but stainless steel is just nice because this is it's sticky work and involves a lot of cleaning, and the carbon fiber will tend to kind of rust up on you. So what I've done here is I'm just carving. I just carved away. You'll see there's 3 different dimples on it. This is the one that the first sprout emerges from, and I'm not sure if it's a root or a leaf sprout, but it's the softest and the biggest and the easiest one to remove. So that's what I remove first, and then I kind of get the knife down in there and core it out to remove that meat and get to the inside of there where I can access the water. And then with the really ripened ones, I always like to taste them first, because sometimes the water will begin to ferment inside of the coconut and it'll give it like sort of a cheesy, I don't know, sometimes kind of like feet, sometimes kind of like bad meat or funky yogurt sort of flavor, and I don't want that to go in my milk. So I always test it first. Yeah, and not a lot of sweetness, but still a great flavor, and we want that liquid in there. So as much as possible, I want to get as much liquid in there as I can, because we need the coconut meat to ultimately be fully covered with the liquid. So what I'm finding is with the 64-ounce Vitamix pitcher and working with the Breville masticating juicer, in order to get the blended coconut milk to pass through the juicer smoothly and effectively, and for the fiber to get nicely separated from the milk, it's important to use at least the meat from 2 brown coconuts per batch, and then I'll use as much water and jelly meat as there is room for, because what I'm finding is I end up needing to use probably 2 of these that have the kind of rubbery meat, and then 1 of these that has like the really gelatinous sort of meat. And so now that I've got the water out of this fully ripened one, we're just gonna beat it with a hammer a little bit, and you'll see it starts to crack. And I like to kind of work my way all the way around it, because it seems to kind of loosen the meat a little bit when I do that, and that helps to make it easier to extract here in a minute, which is currently the hardest part of this process for me. So if anybody watching knows some ways that I can more easily extract this coconut meat, I would be greatly appreciative. I'm looking into potentially getting a kind of a grinder. So you can see right there, this whole section just popped away and exposed just the meat. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. By tapping it all the way around, sometimes you can just sort of knock the meat away from the shell, which is ultimately the most ideal, because then I don't have to use any knife or any spoon, and I don't tear up my fingers. I don't know if you can see, but that's all coconut shell from prying into it and then slipping and scraping myself on the coconut, which is a real issue. And then that one right there, that little cut, that was from using the knife and a slip. Usually I'm pretty good about keeping my hands away from anywhere that the knife can slip towards, but it's very difficult when working with coconuts. So speaking of the knife, let's start with this. So I just kind of, as much as possible, like I was saying before, I try to keep the knife going away from me. So I've got the knife going in here and just sort of working it in right on the edge, and then gently twisting in order to sort of pry the meat. And then as I get an edge to work with, I'll flip the knife around. But important to note, I'm not pushing in. If I was pushing this way, I wouldn't have the knife pointing towards me. I'm just getting the edge of the blade in there and then twisting it up. I'm using this as a pry, so that anytime that there's force on it, it's just a twisting force, not a cutting force, because that's how you slip and cut yourself. So there you can see that nice piece of meat just came free and clean from there. So we'll toss that into the blender. And then over here where you can see that the shell came loose, we'll just kind of break these pieces off first and see what we're left with. Sometimes it's helpful to just give the shell an extra break. And so here we have, can you see that little gap that's forming right there? When I have that gap, I like to use this incredible tool that was gifted to me by an awesome brother down in South Florida named Siri Coco. And he gifted me this tool last year when I was down here processing coconuts. And when you have that little gap there, you can get this, it's sort of like a flattened ice cream scoop. And I see things like this also at the thrift store. I've gotten like 3 or 4 of them now. And you just kind of work the tool around and boom, just like that, nice and easy. So there's also, you know, just to be totally transparent about it all, there's a lot to be said for the variety of coconut that you harvest from. Not all coconuts come free from the shell so easily. Now we'll move on to the rubber coconut that I showed you before that has that nice rubbery meat. So this is halfway between the water cocoa or the jelly cocoa and the fully ripe cocoa. And you can see, look at the thickness of that meat. It's fully thickened, but barely fibrous. It's so good. These are kind of my favorite cocos. If I had to choose just one, I would go with the half ripes every time. And good fat content, good fiber content. So easy to work with. Same way that I approached the brown coconut, we'll go for this one. Only the difference with this one is the prying doesn't work so well because the flesh is much more rubbery. So I just try and establish a little bit of an edge and then go straight to the spoon, because with the rubberiness of this stage of coconut, it's relatively easy to just get right in there with the spoon. So we'll just get right in there with the spoon. And I try to follow the edge as much as I can. Work my way all the way around with these, because this one's kind of tough because it's a relatively small coconut. But with larger ones, it's even easier to get the tool back in there and just sort of work your way around. And there you have it. So that's what we're going for. I'll kind of brush away the bits of fibrous outer husk because it is kind of bitter. You might notice that I left it on there in the brown ones. That's because, one, it's not as bitter. The fiber seems to be what helps to keep it moving when it goes through the juicer. So I definitely want a certain amount of fiber in there. And like I said before, the magic amount for the Breville juicer, the Breville top loading masticating juicer, I'm not sure what exactly model it is. I just found it on Craigslist for 25 bucks, and I said, oh my goodness, a masticating juicer for 25 bucks. I mean, don't get me wrong, I had been looking for weeks, but I would just search masticating juicer from time to time and see what would come up, and this Breville came up for 25 bucks, and I looked it up. It's like 150, 200 bucks brand new, so not bad even still. So now you can see we've got a little bit of coconut water in the bottom, and we've got the meat from one rubber coconut and the meat from one woody coconut. So I'll get another woody coconut going, and then we'll crack into the water element. So there we go, we got all of that in there. So now we've got the meat from 2 brown coconuts, 1 rubber coconut, and I think that's it actually. No jelly coconuts in this one yet. So now we're gonna go for the water. Now before we crack this one open, listen close. There's barely any space in there. That means this is gonna definitely be a jelly cocoa. My favorite ones for the water tend to be the yellow flesh varieties. I don't know what it is about them, but they tend to have the sweetest water that I've tasted so far. That might just be coincidence, but whew, 2 different yellow varieties have been my 2 favorite trees in South Florida. So we're almost covered here. So, as you can see, we've got the Vitamix pitcher all filled up with coconut water and coconut meat. Took quite a bit of work, but we are there, and now we're ready for the magical part, which is where we blend it all up. And so I'm going to be using a Vitamix for this today. And I think, you know, you can really use any type of blender, but you know, the higher quality the blender, the finer the particles, and the higher the quality of coconut milk you're gonna get out of it. So I went ahead and made the investment last year to get myself a Vitamix, and I gotta say it was one of the best choices I've ever made as far as food processing equipment goes. So here we go, we're gonna get it rocking. So now we've got it all blended, and the way that I used to do things would be, at this stage I would run it through a cheesecloth or some kind of a strainer and squeeze all of the juice out. But what I've found is that that's really hard on my hands, and it's not very efficient, and I would end up losing a lot of the good coconut milk. So what we'll be doing instead is utilizing this nice little Champion juicer that Andy Firk gifted me with. Okay, first run, let's see how this goes. I think I'm gonna need a better juicer for this. This thing's a beast. Works great for making ice cream and things like that. But I'm gonna need something with more of a masticating function to it. Norwalk will probably cut the mustard. That being said, this is some mighty fine coconut milk. Yeah, that's primo. Definitely some amazing stuff. Let's try the other juicer though and see where that gets us. Okay, so the Champion wasn't such a champion after all, at least not in this instance. I'm sure once I've got this coconut milk all frozen up and I'm ready to use it for making a wonderful coconut mango or coconut strawberry ice cream, it will absolutely excel. But as for separating the coconut fiber from the coconut milk, didn't do such a good job. The fiber that came out at the end was still very wet and had a lot more juice left in it. And it just didn't quite get the job done. So we're gonna try this Breville. I've tried it before, and it worked very well at getting all of the pulp separated from the milk, but where it left a lot to be desired was in the realm of being able to effectively continue processing. It gets clogged very easily and quickly. So we'll see how it does on this round. So far so good, and you can see it's highly efficient. And there we have our first quart. So I'll go ahead and get another one washed up. That's the thing about these brand new mason jars. I wish there was a smell-o-vision so that you could smell the weird plastic. It just smells like plastic from a factory. It's pretty gross. So I always wash them first. Be right back. Okay, so jar 1 all done. Let's see how long it takes to get through jar 2. This is a pretty good level of efficiency, considering this is a 64-ounce pitcher and we've gotten just about 64 ounces of coconut milk from it. So this is really doing a great job at extracting all the liquid that we blended up in this container. Look at that. Give it a little bit of a tip to get the last of that coconut milk out of there. And from one pitcher, we've got almost 2 full quarts and almost a full quart of coconut meal, which we can then dehydrate, grind into a flour, and use for gluten-free confections. So that's the long and short of it. And then the next step for me will be to pressure cook these, and then they'll be shelf stable for over a year, and I'll be able to share this lovely coconut milk with my friends in the form of golden milk and coconut curries and all kinds of delicious treats. So yeah, that's my step-by-step process. All you need is a blender, and in this case I used a juicer, but you could just use a cheesecloth. It's not going to be quite as efficient or quite as fine of a product at the end, but you know, all that being said, I got the Vitamix through like PayPal credit with 0% interest for 2 years. So the Vitamix cost me about $20 a month, and this Breville juicer I found on Craigslist for $25 just by searching masticating juicer. And so yeah, it doesn't have to be too expensive, and of course the jars are about $1 a piece. So there you have it. Get out there and start making your own coconut milk, family. Peace. If you found this video helpful and you want to see more content like this, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and keep on being the love, family.